It's time for the book interview.
Boring books, that's all.
Books? Are you nuts?
No, nothing boring here. Money Life will bring you a book that is out right now. A book that will help you learn more about your finances.
A book that would make Ulysses look like it was written in crayon.
Smart books by smart authors that can help you decide how to best manage your money.
It's not a book. It's a weapon!
It's a weapon against making the kind of mistakes that people make in their financial lives. Money Life brings you the books, the authors, and the information to protect you from these missteps and help to keep your financial future secure.
I read your book. I liked it. Very, very much.
Don't just take it on faith. Hear the authors talk in depth about their books and give you the facts and figures to back up their information.
It's faith. It's the flower of light in the field of darkness. It's giving me the strength to carry on. You understand?
Is that from your book?
No, it's Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison.
Welcome to the book interview on Money Life. I am joined right now by Christopher Manske. He is the author of The Prepared Investor, How to Prevent the Next Crisis from Affecting Your Financial Independence. He is a financial advisor, and if you want to learn more about him and the book, well, ManskeWealth.com, that's the name of the firm, /book, and you will get there. By the way, on Twitter, at Manske Wealth, and we've got a couple of copies to give away. So if you stick around till the end of today's show, we will have a contest that, well, you might be lucky enough to get a copy. Chris Manske, welcome to Money Life.
I'm glad to be here, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
You know, we made a conscious decision of when we wanted to do this. The book's been out not too long, but a little while. We made a conscious decision of when we wanted to do this because we wanted to make sure we were getting past the election before we even talked. Why? Because there are plenty of people who think the next financial crisis could be on us at any moment right now, or that maybe it's the one we're living through with the pandemic. So let's start there. When you talk about the next financial crisis, help my audience understand, does it matter what causes that crisis, what that crisis is, and what does a crisis look like these days? Because it's kind of hard to tell.
It is hard to tell, and that means that it does matter what causes it and how people react to it. Typically, Wall Street will say, when talking to Main Street, our advisors, investment advisors in general, say, just stay the course. Regardless of the crisis, regardless of how the crisis came to be, and without regard to how people are reacting to it, there's this one answer, just stay the course. And that is the tip of the iceberg. When you really examine what creates each crisis, how people react to it, you start to see that there is a lot of nuance. And with just a little bit of information and a little bit of preparation, you can take advantage of that nuance and really protect and even grow your portfolio.
Part of what's important here is that protection side of things. It has been really interesting as we got into the pandemic to see what's been happening in financial circles, because prior to February of this year, as the market tanked leading up to the first quasi shutdown that we had,
right?
Well, we stopped hearing a lot. Prior to that time, we were hearing all the time. It was like every day there was another headline of all the people who are financial independents retire early. It was another story about, hey, do this, look at what this, you'll retire when you're 45 or what have you. When that all happened and the market tanked in February and March, the financial independence community got pretty quiet. And you talk a little bit about financial independence here. Not necessarily that hardcore fire, you got to get out as soon as you can, but how you're building for financial independence. And I think so many of the fire people I've talked to were kind of shaken by what we saw happen. Does that mean that they weren't properly prepared? I mean, if what we saw in February and March, as unusual as it was, truly shook you to your core and has you question what you were doing, were you not prepared?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the amount of shaking to the core is going to be different for everybody. But when you feel that tremor, you feel that worry, that real kind of knock you back a bit and truly question the path you're on, that means you're not prepared. In fact, it doesn't even have to be finance. We could say that when you get a flat tire on the road, when you're struck with terror by this, Well, it's because you've never changed a flat tire before. It's because you've never put the equipment into your car. You know that you're not ready for this particular crisis. Same thing when someone tells you, hey, there's going to be a freeze tomorrow, and you feel that, oh, no, I never put any effort into preparing the water pipes at the house. This is not good. You know when you're not prepared, and it does lead to a sense of panic. It leads to the kinds of emotions that don't help us when we're trying to make good, smart financial decisions.
Yet we're in a pandemic that, quite honestly, nobody was properly prepared for, whether that's from a public health standpoint or perhaps even more from the financial standpoint. I mean, we were prepared for a lot of things, but a shutdown of the economy like we've never seen in our entire lifetimes, I don't think that was on anybody's radar screen. So how much do you have to prepare for the once in a century event versus the once every couple of years event?
Well, it's funny how preparation works. The level of preparedness is going to be effective for once a century disaster just as well as the happens every 8 years disaster. And again, just to use the simple example of the tire, you could have your flat tire on the way to a very important job interview. This is a once in a lifetime situation. Or you could have your flat tire, in your driveway and it's a flat. Oh, okay. I wasn't really needing to go to the grocery store right now. In both cases, you're prepared, and that level of preparedness is going to help. You're going to be on your way faster when you know how to handle that situation. It's the same with the portfolio. The pandemic and this once-in-a-lifetime crisis, the reality is that a lot of crises are once in a lifetime. The reality is that when you read through The Prepared Investor and you see how each crisis from the last 100 years that I talk about is unique, and it's scary, and it really is once in a lifetime. It's part of what makes it a crisis. There's going to be another once-in-a-lifetime crisis in the future, and it's good to be prepared for it.
I should point out, your background is from the military. You're a West Point grad, and boy, if you think the Boy Scouts recommend be prepared, well, the military that much more, obviously. How much of our preparedness is a generational thing? I mean, my audience spans generations. It has maybe more in one generation or another, but how much of all of this is kind of where you've been? If you lived through the internet bubble and then you lived through the financial crisis, you've lived through more than somebody who has just been investing for the last few years, and their first bear market was in February and March. So how much is this generational? How much is this, well, everybody needs to be prepared, and it doesn't make a difference what generation you're in?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. One way is, do different generations value preparedness differently? And the other way is, who should be more prepared? And the answer to both of those is, that there is a difference. The value that someone who has experience, who's experienced life and the hard knocks and the surprises and pitfalls of 30, 40, 50, 60 years of hard-won experience, you know what? They value preparedness a lot more than someone who still believes they can live forever and that nothing can hurt them. And we've all been there. And I'd love to go back to my youthful days of invincibility when I didn't value preparedness as much as I do today. But that doesn't mean that you can't benefit from being prepared. One of the vignettes in the book talks about how some of the teenagers that my just newly driving teenager daughter, some of them have said that they're prepared for a flat tire because they have a cell phone. And it's not that they're wrong. They're just not prepared.
They're not adequately prepared. That's
correct.
That's a bit of the leaky roof situation where, you can have a leaky roof, but it's just as good as anybody else's on a sunny day. That's
right.
It depends on how bad the rain is before you realize that that's a problem. Quickly, because we're almost out of time. What's the event that you think people need to be most prepared for? Because I think people worry about a bear market, but a bear market's ordinary. Do you worry more about a bear market than you do a market crash, than you do about what's going on societally and where we are politically and what could happen with what is the thing that you would tell people, if you have not prepared for this, you have not really prepared any better than that teenager with the cell phone?
Right. Well, I think the answer to this is illiquidity. You know, we've seen that just recently with the pandemic. Almost every crisis, regardless of what caused it or the effect, one of the things that you can expect to be a normal reaction is that it's tough to make ends meet. Maybe it's tough because you didn't save up enough. Maybe it's tough because the government has actually shut down businesses. Maybe it's tough because there's been a run on the bank and you can't get to your bank account. You want to be ready for illiquidity. It's a major part of what makes a crisis a terrible, terrible time.
You know, it is. In fact, the funny side is for years, as I would write my columns to say, hey, what do you worry, what's happening in the year ahead? My worry has always been a liquidity crisis. It's the one that I always got wrong, but I kept feeling the need to tell people about because, yeah, that would be bad. But any crisis is bad. That may be why I want to check out Chris Manske's book. It's The Prepared Investor, How to Prevent the Next Crisis from Affecting Your Financial Independence. Christopher Manske, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time and thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. This has been a joy.
That's Chris Manske. If you want to learn more about The Prepared Investor or about him and his firm, go to manskewealth.com. To learn specifically about the book, make it manskewealth.com/book. And as long as you're remembering Manske Wealth, on Twitter, @ManskeWealth. All right, this was a fun conversation, like as much fun as you can have when you're worrying about crises, right? But we've got more fun to go, so settle back, relax. We're living the money life, and we'll be right back at it in just a moment.